Hi, I'm Lucy from Vuba,
I'm Ash from Vuba.
and today we thought we'd do a bit of a video just on a few tips and tricks that Ash has learned over his 5 years at Vuba as part of the technical team. He's spent a lot of time on site, and you pick up on a lot of kind of things that different contractors do that we thought might be good to put in one video, and then it might help somebody when they're on site one day. So this week, Ash has been on site with some of our approved installers where he's picked up on a really good tip, especially for when people are on large jobs, that helps to speed up the mixing process.
What they'd done is the lid for the resin, they'd actually cut that in half so they could lay the hardener tub into it. So the one hardener can be emptying in while they're doing their first mix. So they can keep their mixer on, they don't have to turn the mixer off and stop. They can mix a resin, that can go in to the mixer, and then the next one will be ready for them to mix straight away, so they ain't got to wait for that crossover period.
So they're not having to scrape the hardener bucket out as much because it's going in while they're mixing one, meaning that the process gets quicker and smoother essentially.
Yeah.
So when I was at the Core Open event last week, one thing that a contractor told me that I thought was a really good tip was that they'll use carpet liner protector to line the wheelbarrows. So instead of using a pallet wrap or tarpaulin or something and then taping it around the wheelbarrow, which often can then come loose after a few mixes and a few uses, that then sticks for longer, not necessarily for the full job, but it does stick for longer. It also means that the upside of the carpet liner isn't as adhesive as what the plastic is, meaning that it's not holding as much of the material that's going into it, and you're not having as much of them old mixes stuck to your wheelbarrow. So essentially it just helps keep the process simpler and tidier.
When it comes to meshing a job, obviously it's important that you mesh the entire area. If you've got a join or a bordering, you need to be meshing underneath that trim that separates the main part of the driveway or project from the border, because obviously there's still going to be movement outside the trim, so the mesh is going to help mitigate any cracks.
So on site, obviously sometimes things can happen. Resin tubs get knocked over or spill onto edgings or concrete that's at the end of the driveway. So it's important to make sure you're prepping your site properly before you've started. Things like making sure you've got a tarpaulin area where you're mixing on top of, so your mixing area, at the end of the day you can scoop that up and just chuck that away essentially, is really important. And making sure to cover up anything like block edgings, etc., so you don't get any resin on them. But accidents do still happen, and when there is a resin spillage, you do need to make sure you deal with it appropriately essentially.
We found the best practice to any type of cleanup is to get some binding quartz or some sand from a local builder's merchant straight on it, not allowing the product to set. If you're letting it set, that's going to be a lot more difficult to get up. It's going to leave stains. Getting it up as soon as possible and as efficiently as possible is really important.
So obviously, good old British summer does come with varying weather conditions, but there's many things you can do for kind of peak summer or during winter that'll help maximise your working time. We pre-catalyse the resin weekly, depending on temperatures, but these things will just help you get the most out of the working time and resin systems.
In peak summer, if you can try to store your resins, especially on site, in some type of shade under a cover, out of direct sunlight really, that's going to prolong your working time, because if you store them in direct sunlight, as the resin's obviously heating up in the tub, once you then go to mix that, you're adding more heat. That's just going to speed up the curing process. That's going to cut your working time down by potentially half.
With your base, you want your base to be as cool as possible as well, because same as Ash said with the resins, with resin being an exothermic reaction, if it hits a base that's already absorbed a load of heat for hours and it's really hot, that again is going to speed up the curing time and reduce your working time. So what we've seen people do in the past, especially when going on top of bases like tarmac, which are obviously black and absorb a lot of heat, is potentially put a black tarpaulin over it, and you would roll that back as you're doing the mixes so that it's the tarpaulin that's absorbing the heat rather than the base. Obviously using bases like Vuba that you can go on top of straight away, and don't absorb the heat as much, helps with this as well. But it's just a bit of a good tip for people to know.
On the other side of that, in the winter, it's good practice to try and keep your resins inside your van if possible. Try and heat them up slightly before using them, because when the resins cool right down, obviously if it's been minus temperatures overnight, the colder the resin is when you come to using it, it's going to be more viscous, so it's going to be harder to mix, harder to lay. So if you can warm them up slightly in the winter time, that's going to help obviously the laying process after that, which is going to make it easier for you lads on site.
So obviously, myself and Ash are not pretending to be experts of installation by any means, but these are just a few tips and tricks that we feel like we've learned over the past 5 years, working at Vuba, spending a lot of time on different sites with different contractors, and we're always looking to share that knowledge and gain more knowledge as well. So yeah, hopefully this helps a few of you. I'm sure a lot of you already know some of these tips and stuff, but hopefully it'll help a few of you when you're on site.